And now we welcome a very special guest here onto the show. It's former Fighting Saint. If we were posting it on Twitter, it would be Saint for Life, Nate Sucese. And Nate, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Nate, obviously, former Fighting Saint, just finished your Penn State career. We'll get into that a little bit because I know it's not the ending that anyone wanted right now in the sports world. But most recently, let's start with the fact that you are now a member of the Arizona Coyotes. You signed that entry-level deal just a couple weeks ago. And so when you look at the signing that deal and what went into the process, when you finally inked that deal, what was the overall feeling?
It was just a feeling of achievement. There's been a lot of hard work, not only by me, but all my family members with time and obviously money put into this crazy sport that we play. So to be able to put the pen to paper was a huge accomplishment, and I'm ready to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, and when you look at your career for Penn State, I don't want to delve too much into the abruptness and the end of the season because it's not what anyone wants to talk about right now. But just take us through. I'm sure it was about a 24-hour period where you get the news and you figure it out. Everyone has different stories where they were, how it happened for them. But how did you end up finding out the news?
We were I live with three other guys in my class, and we were sitting on the couch. We just got done with Thursday workout and practice, getting ready to play in our semifinal game in the Big Ten tournament. And it was pretty hard to find out on Twitter. NCAA goes and cancels all the NCAA tournaments, and before the Big Ten had even canceled our tournament. So we went from earlier in the week playing without fans, being able to have four family members in the crowd, to 24 hours later getting the news of all of NCAA sports being canceled.
That being said, you do get to accomplish something that Penn State hockey had yet to do this season, and that's a regular season Big Ten title. Those last couple weeks were crazy, and the Big Ten, me being a Penn Stater, I got to follow it as well very closely, but it's so tough to win 2 games in a row in the Big Ten. I don't think people realize how tough that is. But when you were able to win those 2 games against Minnesota, and then you're watching from your couch the next weekend, finding out that you're in sole possession of the regular season title, what were those 2 weeks like?
It was crazy. We knew we had to the last weekend of the year, we actually had a bye. So our second to last weekend of the year was our regular season final games, and we had to get 5 out of 6 points to even give us a chance to get the regular season title. And then the next weekend when we had our bye, we were all watching everybody else's games, and there was 2 teams that had a chance to get 5 out of 6 points, which we did the weekend before to capture the title, and they didn't. So we ended up having a second bye in the first round of the Big Ten, and ultimately we never got to play our semifinal game. So to be able to go out, I guess, as a champion as for the regular season was, I guess, a cherry on top of, coming out of this bad situation in the sports world, if you want to put it that way.
And you go out a champion again, if you will. I know that hockey players are pretty humble, so they're not going to claim full ownership of a title without winning the tournament as well. But you came into Penn State as a champion as well, because your first season with the Nittany Lions was an incredible run through the Big Ten championship that culminates with Liam Folks' double overtime winner against Wisconsin. So to start at a program at Penn State that was pretty new by winning a Big Ten tournament, what was that first year like for you?
It was crazy, honestly. That's the only word to describe it. There was a lot of us coming in, I think 10 of us in our freshman class, and no one really knew what to expect because we had about half of a new team. And for our class to come in and have the impact that we did on the program, to be able to capture that championship in Detroit in double overtime, and then also the double overtime game before that in the semis against Minnesota. And a lot of the freshman class had a huge impact. If you want to look back at Peyton Jones being our starting goalie as a freshman, and then Dennis Smirnoff had a huge, I think, 47-point season that year. And then ultimately Liam Folks being a freshman, getting the pass from Brandon Byro, who was also a freshman, to score that game winner against Wisconsin to get the ring on our finger. And it kind of just came full circle, we thought, this year. with the Frozen Four being back in Detroit where we had won the Big Ten championship, but ultimately never got to that point.
All those names that you just mentioned coming in with you at a freshman class as well, how nice of a feeling is it to know that you were part of a class that has been so instrumental in continuing to build what Penn State has started to build 7 years ago?
It's incredible. Those three names outside of Dennis Smirnoff were actually my roommates all 4 years. So for our apartment to kind of have the impact that we did on this program and the legacy leading forward, I hope the guys behind us take advantage of the opportunity and know that every day is different and you got to put in the work, but ultimately you don't have to be an upperclassman to make a difference. And I think that's what we did, hitting the ground running freshman year. And I think other classes, as our program gets on the map, will be able to do that right away.
And you won't just be remembered for those accolades that we just mentioned, but you're also going to be remembered, at least for the time being, as Penn State's all-time career points leader. When you hit that milestone, I know a lot of most players are all about team versus individual success, but was that kind of even a moment for you where you could step back and reflect and think, wow, look how far I've come in these 4 years?
Absolutely. I think you can take time to reflect on personal achievements personally. And getting that goal scoring title in Minnesota, where I had never scored a goal in my 4 years up until this year on the road in Minnesota, where I captured the goal scoring title, was super proud of myself for that achievement. And then ultimately at Robert Morris later on in January, getting the all-time points leading total over David Goodwin's was super, surreal. And to be able to have my name at the top of the leaderboard for the time being, at least, I'm sure it won't last long. It's something I can go down in history and move forward with and have that attached to my name.
Before we dive back into a couple of questions about the Fighting Saints, your time there, as you've had a little bit more time, obviously the emotions are still raw, but when you look back at your 4 years at Penn State, how do you try to sum that up if anyone asks, what was 4 years like playing at Pegula Ice Arena?
To have the opportunity to play in this atmosphere in front of the Roar Zone, for people that don't know, is our student section. They stand from the glass all the way up to the ceiling, and they made the Roar Zone as steep as code would allow them in Pennsylvania. So when you look out coming out of the tunnel on Friday and Saturday night and just see a wall of students behind the opposing net, and then obviously all of the alumni that always come back to watch us play, and the community members with a very big season ticket following, makes playing at Penn State something bigger than yourself. And it's pretty special.
So you got your USHL start with the Dubuque Fighting Saints. When you started playing for Dubuque, what are your first couple memories of coming from a lower level and starting to play at the USHL? What were the first couple memories about how the game felt, where you were at as a player, things like that?
Well, my first couple of games, actually my first one, I ended up getting absolutely blown up by a guy that's had a pretty successful career in the NHL. So I missed a few weeks right off the hop. But just the level of play and the style of play and how physical and fast it is, coming from, whether you're coming from playing prep or midget, it's a huge step. And I think me playing 2 years was the biggest attribute for my development. It takes probably about a half a year for me to even get my feet wet. It felt like in the league. So that second year where I blossomed and had a really good year was huge for my development, and I think that allowed me to have an awesome freshman year as well.
Yeah, that was something that I actually had written down because this year's Fighting Saints team, a lot of people that are listening to this interview will know that the most successful players, the Jackson twins, Reese Gaber, they all came back for their second year in the USHL. So if you already started it, but if you're pitching a player that's on the fence about going to college or trying another year in the USHL, what would you say to them to make them stay that extra year in the USHL?
Well, I think a rule that I always had with my family was conquer the level that you were at. Whether it was, playing minor midget and having another year of eligibility in that aspect, whether moving up to major midget or, having another year junior, it never hurts. You don't want to rush the process. And for me, to sign a deal as a turning 24-year-old, your time is never over, and the opportunities are always going to be there. But make sure that you take advantage of the level you're at and be where you're at. Especially, don't look forward to opportunities in the up and coming years, and take advantage of what you have at stake.
You mentioned taking about a half year to get your feet under yourself at the USHL level. When you got your feet under yourself and you could really focus on certain aspects of your game, what are a couple of things you remember improving on a bunch in your 2 years in the USHL that really helped your freshman year at Penn State?
I think wall work as a winger is a huge attribute you can have in your game. Everyone knows, the danger zones from the tops of the circle to the blue line in your own zone, and then obviously in the O zone. You never want to turn over pucks high there. So I think my wall work really improved over my 2 years in the USHL, and then I played wing, moving on to center a few times, and then ultimately I ended as a center. But having the ability to get pucks out and be relied on in the D zone was a huge thing that I could move into the college ranks, and having the reliability of my coaches, knowing I could be out there in dire need situations, whether we're up a goal or down a goal.
You mentioned the craziness of playing in front of the Roar Zone at Pegula Ice Arena. For your junior hockey experience, what was it like coming out every night and playing at the Mesquite Community Ice Center?
It was incredible. Having the city around you, and kind of a small city. I'm from Rochester, New York, so Dubuque was definitely a smaller city for me. And seeing the support from the season ticket holders, the college students that come out on college night was awesome. And then obviously you got to give it up to the billet families that put so much time, effort, money into hosting us Fighting Saints players. They deserve all the credit for what they do. Whether it's cooking your meals, making sure, your laundry's done, and everything above and beyond. They do it to the top notch.
You mentioned the billet families for Fighting Saints, and really for all of junior hockey. It doesn't exist without the billet families. That's, I think, part of the junior hockey experience that might be lost on a couple people is you're anywhere from 16 to 18 years old, and you're moving away from home. You're living with a completely new family. What was that feeling like to be living in a completely different household, different city for basically 9 months out of the year?
It was really nerve-wracking. Making my 15-hour drive from Rochester to Dubuque, I never really knew what to expect. But Dubuque's super lucky, at least for the time I was there, to have Patty as the billet coordinator, and then Joanne helping with all the academics. And they found me an awesome family with Robin and John Jackson. And their family took me in with open arms and kind of treated me like their own. And I've been fortunate enough for them to, they come to Minnesota when I was at Penn State. They came to Notre Dame a few times, and then obviously Wisconsin. And then they actually made a few trips out to Penn State as well. So if you can make an impact and make their lives easier, you'll be able to have a friendship and be part of their family for a lifetime.
Yeah, you mentioned Robin. Every single time I saw her over the last couple years, she would always bring up your name because she knew I went to Penn State. So I always knew exactly what Nate Sucese's stat line was this last weekend, thanks to Robin. So that was always a nice keep up on Penn State hockey. But you mentioned the cooking of the meals. So was there a go-to meal at the Jackson household?
Not really. For dinner, John kind of took over the reins for that. But on Fridays, Robin actually worked her tail off from Monday to Thursday, her 40 hours, so that she could have Fridays off. And she would make, all of us our breakfast after pregame skate, and then have our pregame meal ready before we head out the door on Fridays for home games. So I give all the credit to both of them for the time they put in, and really all we had to do was show up. And so to have people like that in your corner and make things that much easier for you allows you to just concentrate on your play, and ultimately it leads to success.
2 years building a lot of great memories. Do you have one or two that, not necessarily on the ice or off the ice, but just in general, one or two memories that really stick out from your time in Dubuque?
One memory would have to be just the guys. We had such a close-knit group both years, with Keegan Ford, legendary names like him, Gambrell, Malone, Brett Boeing. You can go down the list, Gordy Green. But every Thursday night we'd play poker with each other before home games or Xbox tournaments and even knee hockey as 18-year-olds. So I think the close-knit group that we had off the ice led to success on the ice. And then I think one on-ice memory would have to have been when we were down, I think it was 4-1. Shane Kavanaugh had an absolute huge fight against Bloomington later in my second year, and we ended up winning the game 5-4 with I think we scored 4 goals in the last 8 minutes. And the momentum that a guy like him brought to the table, with whether it was his physical play or when he had to drop the gloves when needed, was just everyone knew that we had each other's backs, and there was never a time where we were going to quit.
I had another question that just popped to my mind. A lot of people on this year's team with the second-year players talk about not just the on-ice experience, but also the off-ice experience being such a big part of growth and staying for that second year. Did you have someone your first year that kind of took you under their wing, and then did you feel yourself transition to that role more your second year?
I think Gambrell was a huge mentor in my time in my first year. We ended up kind of being pretty good buddies and line mates for a better half of the year. And obviously he had an incredible first through third year at Denver, and he kind of hit the ground running his freshman year and ultimately got drafted. And he was a leader on the team with a letter on his shoulder. And ultimately the next year I ended up having a letter on my shoulder. So I could give him Sasha LaRock. I mean, you can go down the list with the veterans we had my first year, but and the coaching staff. OD being the assistant coach at the time, never gave up on me. He'd always have video clips to make me better. We go over a bunch of film, and then Coach Shaw gave me a bunch of opportunities moving forward. So I think the coaching staff and down to my teammates played a huge role for my success in my second year.
So you commit to Penn State and you go there after the Dubuque Fighting Saints. The names you mentioned before, some of your roommates, some of just the players on this Penn State team, a lot of names that were USHL names back in the day, back when you were playing. When you knew you were going to Penn State and kind of saw some of the guys you were going to be playing with, who was one you were really excited to play with that you knew from your time in the USHL?
One of them would have to be Peyton Jones, and then on the forward aspect, it'd be Dennis Smirnoff. He had success going back to his 16-year-old, playing with Indiana Ice, winning a championship with them ultimately before they didn't have a team anymore. And then Jones had an incredible second year in juniors, the same year I did, and he ultimately came in and was our starting goalie. And then Dennis led our team in points with, I think, 47 as a freshman, which is unheard of.
All right, Nate. Well, thanks so much for joining us. If you're up for it, we have some rapid-fire questions that I like to rattle off before the end of this interview, if you're in for that.
Go for it.
All right, absolutely. So the first one is favorite place to play in the USHL other than Dubuque?
Cedar Rapids.
Cedar Rapids. All right, go-to snack on the bus, a lot of long bus rides in the USHL.
I was a big Gushers and Oreo guy.
Give us the go-to song that you had blaring in your headphones before a game.
Welcome to the Jungle or X Gonna Give It To You by DMX.
Do you have any hockey superstitions?
I got all of them. It would take me too long to go through them, but everything starts on the right side. And then Thursday nights, I spend about 2.5 hours taping my sticks and spending time stretching in the Normatec boots.
Someone comes to State College and they say, where's the best go-to place for a late night eat? Where are you telling them to go?
College pizza.
Finally, obviously everyone's kind of spending a lot of time at home right now. So give us your go-to 1 or 2 shows on Netflix right now that you're watching.
I'm watching Ozark right now and All American.
All righty. Perfect. Well, Nate, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate you doing this with us.
Yeah, no problem, Jack. Anytime.
Thank you.